The story starts when Greg gets called into the boss's office, but the boss isn't there when he arrives. The secretary tells him to hang tight, but when the boss finally shows up, he drops the bomb that Greg's getting fired. Greg doesn't seem to register it though, and when the boss leans in to check on him, Greg shoves him. The boss falls, and well, that's the end of the boss. Greg freaks out, hides the body, and when the secretary comes in, she thinks the boss hasn't shown up yet. Greg makes a hasty exit and heads to a bar for a stiff drink. Suddenly, this woman at the table starts giving him attention. She's all like, "You're real," and then she shows off her telekinetic powers. Turns out, she's the one who made this whole world with all its unintended stuff. She asks Greg to sneak into the restroom and grab her boyfriend's yellow crystals. In return, she promises to clear his name of the murder charges. So Greg goes to the restroom, finds her boyfriend passed out, and swipes an amulet with yellow crystals from his hand. The woman had said these crystals could control this whole phony world. After doing what she asked, the woman holds Greg's hands and tells him that the world is simply a reflection of light from human neurons, and it can be changed. At the same time, the boss's body in the office begins to move, reaches for the window, and then falls onto the street in front of some office workers. Greg hurries over, and since everyone saw him coming from the bar, no one suspects him. The woman leads Greg away, ensuring everyone knows he wasn't involved. Although Greg wants to go back for his wallet, which holds all his documents and money, the woman convinces him to let it go, and even suggests he sell his phone at a pawn shop for very little money. On the TV, the news is saying the police are looking into a murder, but the woman suggests to Greg that they should stay together in a tent city, under a bridge where they have electricity and a quiet TV. Meanwhile, Greg finds out on TV that his boss's death was ruled an accident, meaning he's in the clear, but he's stuck because he left his key and documents in the office and was living in a hotel. The woman offers to let him stay and teaches him how to move things with his mind. Greg loves it and shares his dream home with her, which he always sketches. When he shows her the drawings, she realizes he's been drawing her and tells him that this is their real life. In the actual world, they're a couple, although he's forgotten her name, Isabel. So, Greg's daughter Emily goes to her brother Arthur asking for help to find their father. But Arthur isn't keen on reconnecting with a father who is always too wrapped up in work to remember his own kids. Meanwhile, Greg and Isabel head to a roller skating rink and take some yellow crystals, which leads to them having a blast. Isabel becomes convinced that the people around them aren't real and suggests knocking them over. After some initial reluctance, Greg starts using his mind to push people around, and they find it incredibly amusing, entertaining themselves until they get bored. As they leave, they watch the police arrive, and then manage to teleport themselves into a police car and continue their fun at the station before eventually getting tired of the game and leaving. While Emily looked for her father in nearby hotels, she didn't have any luck. Then, Isabel proposed grabbing a bite to eat and asked Greg to order while she took a break. Greg headed to a cafe and noticed Isabel flagging down a car. She hopped in and drove off. Unbeknownst to him, his son was at the cafe and witnessed the whole thing. Later, the bartender mistakenly gave him expired food, thinking he was homeless. Isabel comes back and suggests they visit Kendo, a guy who makes crystals. They split up when they get close to his place. Isabel goes into the house while Greg stays outside, where he's found by his daughter Emily. She wants him to go with her, but he says he has to wait for Isabel. Emily forgives him for missing her graduation and gives him a photo with her home phone number. After she leaves, Isabel comes back and tells Greg to forget about his daughter, saying she's not real. They argue, and then a local troublemaker steps in. Greg asks for a yellow crystal and uses telekinesis to flip the troublemaker's car. In the morning, Greg wakes up at the tent camp, only to find that Isabel is nowhere to be found. After searching for her, he comes across his daughter's photo with a phone number and decides to head to the nearest payphone. Unfortunately, no one answers the call, and when Greg returns, he's met with Isabel's frustration. She was worried she had lost him. Emily isn't real, she's just a simulation. But Greg can't bring himself to believe it, especially since Isabel doesn't provide any other proof. So she takes out special blue crystals, of which there are only 16 in total, and each of them is supposed to take 10. Isabel reassures both him and herself, saying everything will be okay, loads the crystals into a special device, and hands it to Greg. It's time to leave the simulation. Greg breathes in, and suddenly finds himself in a room where people are seated in chairs, connected to a single computer by breathing tubes. An assistant named Isabel calls Dr. Clemens to ask about her well-being. She complains that Greg took the simulated personality too seriously, leading them to exit the simulation. She expresses relief that Kendo was able to help find the blue crystals. Isabel points to a guy in the simulation whom she encountered in that world and requests to disconnect Dr. Whitla. The guy quickly approaches Greg. Greg starts asking questions and finds out that Emily is also an imitation. They go outside, and Greg is blown away by how stunning the place is. Gorgeous people and strange see-through figures are all around, which Isabel refers to as telepresence. It turns out that people have figured out how to project their images from a distance, enjoying social interaction while staying put at home. Isabel takes Greg to the waterfront, and he's amazed by the beauty of the surroundings, wondering why he can't remember any of it. She reassures him that it's normal to experience memory loss, and his memories will soon come back. She shows him their home, and Greg realizes that he has always been sketching the real world. So, Emily's still on the hunt for her dad in the simulation, while he's chilling in the real world with his wife. Later, Isabel cops to being a bit careless, and causing her dad's memory loss by bailing on the simulation without enough blue crystals. Then, they start chatting about how the real world used to be a hot mess with pollution and poverty. But thanks to tech like automation, synthetic biology, and asteroid mining, things have totally turned around. Isabel pulls out this cool gadget her dad invented, a thought visualizer, and starts showing off how it draws whatever you're thinking about. Greg gets in on it, naming stuff and watching it pop up in the drawings. With his help, Isabel breaks down how synthetic biology sorted out all the eco-issues, and asteroid mining brought in the big bucks. Apparently, now everyone's getting $500,000 a year, all thanks to robots handling all the dull tasks. People are living it up now, with the time and freedom to pursue their passions. Earth's all safe and prosperous, but Isabel's cooked up this brain box to remind folks to appreciate the good stuff and not take it for granted. Greg begs his wife to stay there for one more day, which they spend swimming in the sea and relaxing on a yacht. In the evening, they go to the city where a scientist concerned about Isabel's research approaches Greg and asks to keep an eye on her. The next morning, Isabel asks Greg to return to the brain box, as she needs to finish her research, but he opposes, arguing she already has enough data and doesn't want to go back to that world. He agrees to give her a public interview instead. In the evening, there's a brainbox presentation happening. The host discusses Isabel, who came up with the idea of simulating different worlds so people can compare life there and here. She invites Greg to the stage to compare his views before and after visiting the brainbox world. It turns out that he used to be a grumpy cynic, but is now content with everything. However, during the talk, he spots Emily in the hall and becomes frozen. She vanishes, and thanks to Isabel, Greg comes back to his senses. Later, a line forms of people eager to talk to brilliant Isabel, while Greg once again sees the ghostly figure of Emily and chases after her. She reminds him that he has children who love him. Greg insists she's not real, but his daughter starts reminiscing about their happy memories, urging him to choose the world he wants to stay in. Meanwhile, down below, there's a sudden commotion. Isabel finds herself at the center, getting jostled in every direction, realizing that something has gone terribly wrong. Just as she calls out for Greg, Emily vanishes. Then, a man grabs a yellow crystal and effortlessly parts the crowd with a wave of his hand. Isabel is stunned, knowing full well that these powers shouldn't be functioning in the real world. Nevertheless, a chaos unfolds as different realities start to blend together. The pair dashes to the laboratory, discovering that by taking an incomplete dose of blue crystals, they've somehow brought a part of the simulation into reality. It's an urgent matter to fix, but the blue crystals are only accessible in that other world. They sit in the chairs and suddenly find themselves back in the simulation. Isabel urges Greg to find Kendo and guides him to a bar across from his former office. To his shock, he spots his former colleagues, including the boss who had fallen from the window, alive and well. Greg demands answers, but Isabel drags him away, reminding him that everything around them is a fabricated world. Desperate for the blue crystals, the couple steals a man's car and money, knowing they need to pay for the crystals in that world. They drive over to Kendo's lab, where Kendo agrees to hand over the crystals. However, he suspiciously reaches for his bell, prompting Isabel to shoot him. It turns out Kendo was unarmed, but Isabel is confident he's okay in the real world. She discovers a packet of blue crystals on his body, and the couple makes a quick exit just as the police storm the building, giving chase. Meanwhile, Emily rushes to her brother upon hearing about their father's sighting, and together, they head to the tent camp. The police surround the camp, demanding the criminals surrender. Isabel counts the crystals and finds there are disastrously few. Only one can transport someone home. She charges a special device and gives it to Greg. He considers sacrificing himself to return to reality, but Isabel isn't convinced it will work. She feels helpless, realizing she's the one who created all of this. Suddenly, Greg admits that this world isn't so bad after all. He has children here. In that moment, Emily rushes out onto the bridge and pleads with her father to surrender and stay alive. Greg asks to be left behind, and Isabel steps into the center, diverting the attention of the police. After making sure Greg has slipped past the camp's perimeter, she takes the crystals and escapes, using the noise of passing cars as cover. He flees to a rehabilitation clinic, where people with similar difficulties are accepted. There, he tells them about a girl who calls him father, and he believes in her. Later on, Greg heads to the park, and there he finds Emily sitting on a bench. She's happy that her father has overcome his addiction, and she confesses her love for him. That's how the movie ends. Many people try to run away from their problems that burden them. They often dream of a different life filled with happiness and peace, but we shouldn't forget that each person creates their own inner world. Only that person can determine which one is real. If you enjoyed it, give us a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be the first to see our new videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.